Got a Fender 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue amp here. And the customer complaint, besides the two missing knobs, is signal murky, weak, distorted. There's also a very high noise floor, even with nothing plugged in. I'll show you that in a moment. Let's see what it sounds like. So here's the reverb channel, vibrato channel. Well, it's got a foot switch. Let me disconnect that. Got a reverb back. Aside from the very high noise floor, that channel actually sounds pretty normal. No pun intended. Let's check the normal channel next. All right, that channel sounds kind of dark and not very defined. That channel definitely is not happy. The knobs are all loose, which would not surprise me if the pots are all loose. Because the knobs are loose, the numbers on them have no correlation to the actual position. I'm most concerned by the buzz in the background. I'm going to move the mic real close to the speaker so you can hear it. Hopefully you heard that. Let's open this up and see what's going on inside. The filter caps are not visibly leaking on the other side. I've featured so many of these on the channel that I'm not going to show the entire process of visually examining things. But what I will show is that beneath this reverb knob, you don't see the nut. You can just see the bottom of that nut is loose to the point where it's well off the chassis. And I suspect that all these nuts, including the input jacks, could probably do with some tightening as well. And those knobs are all kind of crazy. And as the entire circuit makes ground through those connections, let's tighten that up first. And I'll tighten up the output jacks. And so my plan of attack on this, since this is a repair, not mods, is to make sure all the connections are good and tight, and then make sure that all the preamp tubes are good. This tube is used for the normal channel. The normal channel is what sounds the weakest. And I will contact the owner and see if I can get more detailed information. At the same time, where's my little thing? Where'd it go? Found it. I particularly like to make sure that all the transformers are tight on these. They rarely really are. That one wasn't all the way tight. I'll check the choke, reverb, and output transformers from the other side. And this AC safety ground. It's always good to make sure that's good and tight. It was not. That can cause buzzing as well. Because if that's not good and tight, the chassis is not the most effective shield. All right. We get all the knobs off and tighten up this stuff on the front panel and see what difference, if any, that makes. Okay, this one's totally loose. A bunch of them are loose. Yeah, they're all loose. I can turn them all off with, undo them with my fingers. Before I tighten them up, Let me get some of this dust off, just because it's nice to start a bit cleaner. On older amps, I'll have to use a actual cleaner on the panel, but this is just dust. This will come out without any solvents or liquids or anything. Only takes a second. But even on simple repairs like this, where the bill's going to be just the bench fee, every little bit that makes the amp prettier when they get it back. It'll be right now it's going to be the bench fee plus new knobs. All right. So for these, it's an 11 millimeter. I'll start them all by hand. Just get them all finger tight. And the 3 on the normal channel off camera there. And I'll take a socket wrench, and I'm sure there's some proper torque setting on these. You just kind of get a feel for it over the years. These have brass bushings, so they can take a bit more torque. Some of the pots out there which have aluminum or pot metal shafts, you gotta use much less torque. But as all the grounds in the entire amplifier are made through these chassis connections, it's quite nice to have them good. All right, now we switch to the, that was the 11 millimeter for the pots. Switch to 1/2 inch for the input jacks. I've already done, oh, look how loose that is. That's one of the primary grounds of the amp. I already did the speaker and foot switch jacks. Try this one more time. And with these, I can really crank them tight, and they need to be really cranked tight. All right, so let's at least get the knobs back on, the primary controls. It came in missing 2 knobs. One of the remaining knobs had a big chip in it, so I'm gonna get 3 new knobs. And I'll show how I'll put these on. I'll just show the one, because otherwise you're watching me do the same thing over and over again. I take this is 0.96 millimeter. I use whatever I can grab that's handy. It's not even necessary on these. On some Fenders, you need to space it off the panel. Sometimes it'll take a 1.5 millimeter. On this one, it's all right. So anyway, I like to line up the one so that it's on that line. Tighten that really well. And then I confirm that it's not rubbing the chassis and it's not riding that nut to the point where there's any friction. So let me get the others on there real fast. All right. Remember I mentioned I'm using a pick to get them out. This one turns fine. All the ones on the vibrato channel turn just fine. This one is really stiff. This one is pretty stiff. It's because they're riding up on the nuts beneath them. For whatever reason, the pot shafts are just slightly different lengths. So what I want to do is stack some picks. So I've got a 1 millimeter and a 0.96 millimeter here. And that will get it out from the chassis. Just that slight bit more. And if necessary, I'll do that to all of them so they're all exactly the same distance from the chassis. And then it turns much better. So let me do the other one real fast. Okay, they all turn freely now. They all are visibly the same distance from the chassis. So that's good. I'll set all the tone controls at noon. Reverb off, vibrato intensity off. Let's see what tubes came in this thing. All right, for the output, it's got groove tube, man. They're 6V6Ss. These are JJs. And the JJ 6V6s can become microphonic in combos like this. Hopefully these are okay. I haven't checked for that yet. probably a JJ rectifier as well. Let's see what's in the preamp sockets. All right, they all have the proper 12AT, 12AT. They've got these ECC 83s here and another one here. Make sure when you have a Fender, you got AT, AT, and the others are AX. A lot of times there'd be a cheaper tube in V5 in these because there's no signal through it. That's just the triode. That's just the two triodes that do the vibrato. If we still have a normal channel that sounds much darker and kind of lifeless compared to the vibrato channel, I'll swap these tubes and see if the problem stays with the channel or follows the tube. All right, that background buzz that was there is almost gone. Certainly greatly diminished. There's one other thing I will do preventatively in this amp. I'll talk about that in a minute. But let's see how the channels are sounding. So here's the normal channel that was kind of meh before. We get a pick. Just a quick note, other techs, you're going to see a lot of scopes and signal generators and all that. I've got all that. I've got my signal generator and my scope just a foot to the right of where I'm doing all this work. So they're all there, and I use them, but I primarily use them to confirm things that I hear, or to find the source of a weird noise, or just to confirm correct output. I am more signal generator, i.e. guitar driven than measuring devices, because I learned to play guitar a long time before I learned to use a scope. And between a guitar and a voltmeter, multimeter, I can work faster. I bring out the scope when it's needed. I know how to use it too. All right, there's a graininess and a kind of glitchy sound in the background, a little. And when I play this third, or 10th really, minor, it's just on the verge of sounding a little beady, a little out of tune with itself. Let's see how that same simple stuff sounds like on the vibrato channel. So that all sounds quite good on the vibrato channel. It is a much brighter channel. This amp has the bright cap still here, and I will talk to the owner. I know him and I know what he plays, and he would probably prefer to have that removed. He primarily plays big band jazz stuff. But I suspect that we've got a bad tube in V1, the normal channel, causing those problems. And honestly, a bad tube is much more likely than something in the circuit. There's not much to that circuit, and tubes are always the first suspect these days. All right, the tube that was in V1 is this groove tube labeled, what does it say? It says G2T 12AX7R, made in Russia. I suspect that it is a Sovtek 12AX7, WX, whatever, A, which is what most people use in mass production amps. And they're fine tubes, but this one was definitely noisy. I put in a tongue saw. That minor to major 10th no longer has that beat to it, and that grittiness behind the note is gone, and the frequency response is much better. So I think the owner will be very happy to know that so far All the amp is needed was to have its hardware tightened and one new 12AX7. And this is not about Tungsol being better than Sovtek. This is about any preamp tube can wear out, and I think that groove tube Sovtek just didn't make it over time, and the Tungsol is brand new and sounds good. Let me show you the thing I definitely want to change, the two things I definitely want to change, and I'll get the owner's permission for the second one. The first one I'm going to do, and if that sounds, well, I need to find out if it's under warranty before I do the first one too. The first one's a no-brainer as far as things go. Let me show that. All right, I've shown this in other Deluxe Reverbs and other Fenders. These green wires here are the heater wires, and they go to these quick connects. And they've got heater balance resistors here and a fuse here, and then they go to the output tubes. Well, the problem is that these quick connects cannot handle the current that the heater supply has, and over time they begin to burn because that connection is not perfect, and the energy which is not transmitted through the imperfect connection turns into heat, and these do burn over time. The only reason not to do that would be if this amp is in warranty. We don't want to void a warranty if we can help it. Though, from my perspective, the entire amp is much more likely to last a long time if I void the warranty and move those connections directly to the octal socket the way they were in the 60s amps and 70s amps. The reason I would normally just do this as a matter of course is I charge a bench fee. That bench fee covers the first 2 hours. I've not done an hour's worth of work on this amp yet, so moving these wires to here would be covered in that bench fee. So he's going to pay the same price either way. I guess he's also going to have to pay for 3 new knobs. But we should talk about the other thing that I want to do on this amp, and I'll show this video to the owner. All right, this plastic molded speaker cable / plug is a common point of failure on all the Fender reissue series, the Blues series, the Hot Rod series, etc., etc. So I would like to replace that with a Switchcraft plug and higher quality wire soldered to the speaker. It's a C12K, not my favorite, but that's where the speaker choice is subjective. This is objectively bad. This is objectively and observed in the field to be a point of failure. And it's silly to risk $200 worth of tubes and repair costs to a cheap speaker cable / plug when a high quality one costs like $7. Anyway, let me show all this to the owner and see what he approves.